So it's great to see you all, and I'm happy to open the first day of our workshop on loss and preservation in biotechnologies and the life sciences. And the greetings are on behalf of Andy, Lakoff, and myself, although Andy will also say a few words in a minute. So I'd like to place the workshop in the broader context of the center, the Edmond J. Safra Center for Ethics. For those of you who do not know, we're a newly founded center. This is now our third year, and it's a center for ethics, but not of the ordinary kind. I'd like to think of the ethics centers that you may be familiar with. We're less interested in questions of applied ethics and more interested in foundational questions of ethics. So rather than try to solve ethical problems or dilemmas, one of our main focuses is trying to understand how ethical dilemmas emerge. And for that, we bring together not only philosophy or moral philosophy and ethics, but also a broad variety of disciplines. So it's a cross-campus, interdisciplinary endeavor. Our focus is on science, ethics, and democracy, which again emphasizes the fact that we're part of a university that is trying to bring together the sciences, the humanities, and the social sciences together to think of some of these questions. And I'm particularly happy that we're able to have this conference on loss and preservation in biotechnologies and the life sciences, because one of the main focuses of the center is indeed the emergence of new biotechnologies in an attempt to understand them, integrating scientific perspectives, but mainly social sciences and the humanities, and bringing them to explore the life sciences. I won't be long, but let me just say that part of the idea of this conference grew out of conversations Andy and I had a year ago. We were trying to find a common theme that would be of mutual interest and that would also be timely in terms of the question that it brings to the table. I think that this idea of loss and preservation came to mind especially, I'd say, in contrast to a lot of the discussions about sustainability and conservation, which have the emphasis on future-looking and an attempt to sustain the environment for future generations. We want to think about this, about the future, but simultaneously to not lose perspective of the question of the past and how some of these technologies have at least one eye on the past as they are also looking into the future. So in the context of science and technology studies and other studies of sciences, when people today talk about imaginaries of the future, and this is definitely part of our discussion, it's also important to think about imaginaries of the past, and so how these two questions come together. And so we brought a variety of scholars whose interest is in these fields. One last word before I move you to Andy. In a way, this collaboration, Andy, this is for you, is also part of a loss and preservation. I met Andy at graduate school many years ago, and the connection was kind of lost, but it turns out to be preservable. So I'm very happy about this collaboration. Let me also thank the people at the center. First and foremost, Shai and Boaz, who has done a wonderful work in organizing this conference, and also Limor Golan, and of course the law school for hosting us, and all of you who came from near and far to be here with us. I look forward to 2 very productive days of discussion, and then a visit at the zoo, which is what is expected for us on Wednesday. So thank you, and Andy, please.
Well, I'll just be pretty brief and follow on Shai's allusion to some conversations we had when I was able to visit last year. And I first of all want to thank Shai and Haggai and the Center for the generosity in putting this event together. And it's really, I have to say, it's very exciting to see the realization of our initial discussions here today in this room. So let me say a bit about kind of how we got to this theme, or my own read on how we got to this theme of loss and preservation in biotechnology and the life sciences. Thank you.
We need this for the recording more than.
Good. I should say that it's a theme about which I'm something of a neophyte, and so very pleased that a number of experts are here and can help me and Shai and the rest of us think through it. As I was flying to Tel Aviv last year to give some talks on my own research, I was reading a book about the history of the idea of extinction, and it's a book by a popular journalist in the United States called The Sixth Extinction. Some of you may know about, and it moves between an historical and a contemporary register. The historical register being the discovery of the idea of extinction in the 18th century, and the more contemporary register being a movement among current biologists and ecologists who are tracking the process through which the species that they know most about and are most attached to seem to be disappearing for one reason or another, but most fundamentally because of human activities. And I was struck by, I guess, what I would describe as the pathos of the scientists who were engaged with these objects of their interest, who had in many cases begun their careers with a fascination for a given species or type of animal, and only to discover that as their career went on, that species, that animal, was disappearing. And they, much to their own surprise, they had become very engaged with ethical and political discussions about preservation and the task of preservation. Just to give you one image that really struck me from the book, it opens with a discussion of a frog specialist in Costa Rica, and who works on a very fascinating and beautiful kind of frog that only lives in this part of the world, that's been dying off because of a fungus disease. And he found, using a dilapidated hotel, he creates a kind of refuge for this frog. It's sealed off from the fungus that's killing the frogs out in the outside world, and the idea being that this species and similar species of frogs may be able to kind of wait out the destruction of the rest of the frogs if they're sealed off properly in this hotel. And they paint an image of the stream that the frogs normally live in on the walls of this one of the big auditorium rooms in the hotels, in the dilapidated hotel where the frogs are now staying. And it's obviously both a kind of funny or ironic image, but a sad image. And I thought about this question of refuge, and how scientists are kind of taking on a new role in this context. And I thought the way this, I thought, became a good collaborative conversation with Shai and with the center had to do with the question of the ethics of biotechnology, because much of the discourse on the ethical dimensions of developments in biotechnology really, I think, assumes a conflict between instrumentally rational values oriented toward whether it's productivity or use on the one hand, and the question of whether those are causing the deterioration of traditional human values. And I thought that as we talked about, not only species preservation projects, but also other kinds of biopreservation projects, such as the one that Shai has been working on, we began to reflect that actually these sorts of, insofar as biotechnology was involved in biopreservation, the ethical questions, the ethical positions really were quite different from the kind of classical bioethical discourse in fields like stem cell research or the Human Genome Project, in which, and in this case, we really see certain kinds of what we might call classical human values being incorporated into and embedded into biotechnologies in very intriguing ways. So that's just one beginning of a thought that I think has sparked our conversation and led us to want to create a larger conversation with you all. So I'm really looking forward to it. With that.
So before we move to the